Thanks so much for joining us today on Building Bigger Lives. Today, I'm excited for this one because we're going to dig into an event that Michael got to attend that I did not. And that was the HousingWire conference in Scottsdale. And there was some heavy hitter speakers there. And there's a ton of value that we're going to unpack for you today on this podcast episode. So with that, Michael, I'm going to get things launched. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, always happy to be here. And you're right. In particular, this was pretty exciting for me because I've attended, like you, a lot of, let's call them housing industry events over the years. Some of them conferences, some of them workshops, some of them are, promoting something. This was, if I can overstate it, hands down, the best gathering, no pun intended, that I've ever been a part of. It was really an amazing blend of 700 participants that came from probably the bulk of them from the real estate side. I'd say about a 60-40 split of real estate side to mortgage lending side. And maybe that's not a fair split because there were also some folks there from just tech companies or title and insurance. But overall, you've got a really great blend of people coming from different backgrounds. So the speakers reflected that, which meant we got a really nice cross-section of information.
Oh, I'm so excited to hear about it. I'm bummed that I wasn't there, but I know that you were. It was one of the rare times that you said, "Holy cow! I've already bought my next year's ticket." So I know this was a good one. Okay, so you had mentioned that there was a lot of impactful speakers, but we do have a limited time podcast here, and we don't want it to take all day. So, what do you feel like? What speaker was the most impactful for you?
You're correct. It would be very difficult to boil that down to one, but I can tell you the one that as I took notes, I found myself saying, if we could get more people on stage like this, I would sign me up. I'd be here every day, all the time. Two gentlemen. Brian Hale was one of these gentlemen. He is the CEO of Mortgage Advisory Partners. And he was joined by Stan Middleman, who's the CEO of Freedom Mortgage Corp. And the two of them were interviewed by Clayton Collins, who happens to be the CEO of HousingWire. Sounds like a lot of CEOs on the stage, which actually was true, by the way. I mean, the C-suite representation was incredible. But these two gentlemen in particular were capable of getting on stage as the seasoned veterans of the housing industry, specifically on the lending side, and were capable of just shooting straight from the hip. And if I had to sum up their talk, happy to break it down, but to sum it up, they really were coming from a place of, in a world where M&A activity is really high right now, they act as consultants to a lot of companies that need help figuring out how to properly evaluate or create the merger that's necessary. And they are just drilling down on what I would call knowing your numbers. I mean, from a corporate level, all the way down to a branch level, knowing your numbers and knowing them so well that you know exactly the type of business to be doing, exactly how to price it, and exactly how to turn a profit. And basically, nothing else is acceptable. Like, it is unacceptable to be producing loans at a loss. And we see it all over our industry right now. And we can come up with all kinds of reasons why that happens, or maybe some excuses for why that happens. But the beauty of their talk was, at the end of the day, a company acquiring another company who can't see clearly where the profit is really just a dumb move. Like, dumb to think, oh, I'm acquiring market share, or I'm acquiring these influential people that can help. He said all of that is really unsustainable and foolish for these companies that continue to acquire without really understanding where the profit centers are. And I think the phrase that I heard from the stage that really resonated with me is, you have to know your core competencies as an organization. Again, executive level down to the branch level. You have to know your core competencies so well that you price everything to your core competencies, not to your competition. So it was basically like, stop this foolish race to the bottom. It was so refreshing to hear. They said a lot of other things, some of which were provocative, some of which were profound, and some were profane, but they were really good.
Good use of the letter P today. Um, Speaking of PE, let's talk about perspectives.
Hmm.
So there was, it sounds like a ton of C-suite CEOs from real estate like Remax, Keller Williams, Sotheby's, etc. And then you had the mortgage C-suite like Guild, Rocket, United Wholesale, Thrive, Guaranteed Rate. So you got to see kind of both of their perspectives.
Yeah.
How would you kind of compare and contrast the feeling that you got from them, or the outlook, or the mindset even from those differing industries, yet in the same overall industry?
Perhaps I'm a little late to the dance, so I want to acknowledge that, there could be a listener out there thinking, Michael, this has been the norm for a heck of a long time. But because I work in one-on-one coaching, a lot of times my perspective is skewed to the person that I'm coaching. And it was so refreshing to get this high-level overview from both sides. And what I found interesting was no matter what the topic was, there was a lot more collaboration and agreement than there was disagreement and
Mm,
distance. And that was refreshing for me to see because it
mhm.
was a sense of whether you're on the real estate side of this, so you're
Yeah.
a broker agent running on the real estate side, or you're a independent mortgage banker or broker on the lending side, we can't do this alone. We have to work together. And it reminded me of a phrase, you and I are maybe guilty of this, like any of us. We pick up this phrase about being in the mortgage industry. And of course, when you're here in that room, you hear people that talk about the real estate industry.
Mhm.
Perhaps because this was a HousingWire event, I'm really trying to change my language to we're all in the housing industry.
Mhm.
We're all in one big industry, and really one hand washes the other. And if we're not smart about that and we think we can go it alone, we're in isolation. So because that's true, I'm seeing, go back to that word collaboration. I'm seeing a lot of real estate companies and a lot of lending companies that are beginning to talk about how to create a collaborative that allows them to serve both sides. And that will be interesting. That will mean
Mhm.
some real estate companies will want to increase their role in lending. That'll mean some lending companies will want to increase their role in real estate, and that'll create some confusion for the audience while we go through that. They'll also be dabbling in things like insurance and in title and other things that I think have existed for a while.
Yeah.
But I think the sense was none of us is going to survive alone. So I think in my opinion, you'll see this start to evolve into one of three categories. The M&A activity will increase, meaning people will either merge or be acquired.
Mhm.
The second will be some sort of collaborative joint venture. Will agree to stay independent but create something together, or there'll be some sort of less formal agreement, maybe a strategic partnership, some sort of handshake agreement built on KPIs. But I just think we're going to be in a very collaborative environment because I think they realize the consumer is driving it. The consumer expects turnkey solutions, and so hearing these major companies think and talk this way just reminded me that the sooner we innovate toward more collaborative relationships, the better.
Oh, so interesting. And I think that the C-suite of our industry has to focus so much more on that go forward mentality. The what do things look like in a year, 5 years? And I think when you're on the ground, we're not as good as that forward focus. So I think that's such a great perspective for everybody to get, because you sometimes forget that there's a different view from up above. So,
So great point, Catherine. We often hear the old Gretzky quote of, I skate to where I see the puck is going. My
mhm,
advice to those of us who work at a street level role, so we're running a local real estate company or we're running a local mortgage company, and we have a very locally focused daily routine.
mhm,
Attending an event like this allows you to take a glimpse at where the puck is going. All of these C-level people don't have to be right. In fact, I'm sure we'll find out later some of them were and some of them weren't. But we have to understand they are the ones influencing the direction that these things will go. And as long as we're respectful of the fact that we can listen to understand, we don't have to be right, we don't have to
mhm.
be wrong. We just need to understand that if that's the direction these major companies are going. I mean, when UWM and Rocket tell you where they're going, you may not like their model, but you better listen to it because they're going to
Mhm.
create a wake. And some of us can jump in that wake and take advantage of all the plowing that they're going to do. They're the speedboat, they're going to drive it. We can jump in behind that. It's hard to do that at a street level if you never hear where some of these major companies are going.
Mhm. Oh, I love that analogy. So thanks for bringing that up. There was a speaker that you brought up to me named Damian Eales, and
Mm.
he is the COO of Realtor.com, and he brought up a list of to-dos. So touch on that because I want to hear more about that.
Well, when we think about realtor.com or any of the real estate portals that are out there, they're all designed to create access points for consumers who are now very well conditioned to go online and start, searching for neighborhoods and properties and details that they like. So that's the context of the type of organization he runs. But because we had this conference right in the wake of what we think now looks like a legitimate NAR settlement from all these previous
Mhm.
cases that date back to, I think, 2020. Um, at this point, he was putting together a promotional piece that they used the conference to unveil and make free and available to everyone. So you can go to realtor.com and see it and download it and feel free to use it. The idea was if we are going to have to create clarity around the value of the buyer's agent going forward, something you and I talked about on our
Mhm.
podcast a couple of months back, if that now is going to be the norm, then his effort with his team was let's get super detailed on all of the things that a typical buyer's agent is involved with so we can push forward the narrative of
Mhm.
all of the value that that buyer's agent is bringing. Once that has been done, they did it in an interesting way. It's kind of like, hey, consumer, you can do all these 111 things, or you can hire a professional realtor to help you do that. I think those will really create the talking points that are necessary by the agents because that's the key. If we get the agents talking about their value, I think similar to what we experienced in mortgage with Dodd-Frank
Mhm.
when we were told how
Mhm.
our income was going to be earned and then we
Mhm.
decided to get ahead of it and start talking about it. Turned out for most of us, that didn't disrupt us like we thought it was going to when we first heard about it. And I think that's
Yeah.
the vibe that Damien was giving with this group was, look, only 30% of the population in April, like April 20th, I think was a survey, has even heard of the NAR settlement. So take out the real estate industry and
Mhm.
the lending industry that we live in and just go out to the normal homeowners in any community you live in. Only 30% of them, 32, I think, have heard of a NAR settlement, and something pitiful like 17% of that group could even tell you what it meant. So the point is,
Mhm.
we're still early in the rollout of
Mhm.
information. So his job was to say, realtors, empower yourselves, get ahead of this, start talking about these things early so that you can justify your value. And I think that will flow into probably three categories for the second half of this year. I don't need to be right about this, but this is how it sounded to me. One will be there'll be a group who will continue to fight as full service real estate agents for the
Mhm.
commission levels they're used to receiving, and they will tell you why they're worth every penny of it. A
Mhm.
second group will say, okay, I can negotiate on what I'm worth. And so I can discount my fee based on a lesser level of services. So if you want me to cut out these things, I can go lower. And then I think a third group will take more of a flat fee approach and they'll say, okay,
Mhm.
we're going to just offer you these 8 to 10 things in a bushel or a bundle, and this is our flat fee for those. And you may see a offering, of some savvy agents who say, you pick like which works best for you. I'm
Mhm.
happy to do any of these. Um, but as that happens, it won't be successful unless this communication happens. So this 111 things to do is a really smart way to just get the talking points out there. By the way, fun fact, I'll pivot off of this topic. When I first got this list, my eye was drawn to where did financing fit in this list?
Mhm.
Kathryn, it was number 42, meaning they felt there were 41 things to do before you prepared your financing. I immediately grabbed Dave Savage as he walked by me in the room and said, this is such old thinking. Like we're still talking about
Yeah.
doing home search activities before we've, even put any effort into finding out
Yeah.
what we're qualified to borrow. Of course, if you're a cash buyer, that's a non-issue, and that's still about 30% of the transactional activity. But that means about 70% of this audience, we might want to move that financing piece up a little in the conversation,
Yeah,
or a
please.
lot. So yeah, it was interesting to. In other words, my point is, I don't think their batting order is right,
Hmm.
but it's still the right topics to get out there.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's great. And I'm sure there was a ton of time spent on that NAR settlement, including the new president of NAR spoke. What were your thoughts on that? They've had some changes, and did you feel settled after listening to him?
So here's what was exciting about that. On the first day I got there, Mauricio Yabansky from the agency got up, and he talked about all of his, NAR alternative movement, like creating a
Hmm.
different version of a group that would represent agents and kind of an alternative to NAR. And so I was intrigued by that. I don't know if it's a great idea, but it at least the space is available for us to maybe see how that could be helpful. So by the time we got around to the current president of NAR showing up, which by the way, he was not on the docket. He was
Oh.
inserted the night before. We got an announcement that came out on our,
Hmm.
app for the event saying, "Hey, interesting news. He's in town for a different event, wants to come to our event, wants to speak." And I think that was my takeaway is I was super impressed by how he truly was leaning into this. There was no
Mm.
sense of, hey, we're waiting to see what happens. We're trying to, yeah. It did not feel at all like a reactive attitude. He felt to me like a guy who was ready to, you know, go toe to toe with anyone
Mm.
in the media who was misrepresenting, what they do as an organization, how they
Yeah.
do it, and what they're hoping to achieve. And I think he empowered a lot of agents in that room to realize, look, NAR isn't dead and its purpose continues. We just need to get better. And because he's new, I think he can deploy that message with some integrity because whatever happened in the past wasn't on his watch. So he's really very forward focused. And I think he shifted the energy in the room. I think most people came in
Mm.
expecting him to be delivering a lot of reasons and excuses for how we got here. And
Hmm.
instead, it was more like, no, here's what we're going to do going forward. I thought he was excellent.
Oh, that's great to hear. I'm glad. So then with that, obviously he was an unexpected guest, but what else were you surprised by, um, kind of refreshed by at the conference?
Well, the energy level there was great. And I think a lot of that credit goes to the team at HousingWire. You have to remember anyone who's hosting an event. So I don't care what event you attend, somebody's responsible for
Mhm.
putting it together. And I think it's really important. We talked about this in one of our podcasts of how to prepare for an event as an attendee. One of the things I don't think we talked about, but maybe could have, is looking at who is hosting this event and what is their purpose in hosting it.
Mhm.
Is this a chance for them to market something or
Mhm.
to promote something, or what is their role? And Housing Wire, at the end of the day, is a journalism organization. Their
Yep.
responsibility is to publish information that gets disseminated throughout the entire housing industry. And they cover all the corners. There's, builders, realtors, lenders, and all the auxiliary services.
Mhm.
They they represent everybody. If you look at their Housing
Mhm.
Wire Daily, articles exist in all of
Mhm.
those corners, as well as some economic data with a guy like Logan. So that's the group hosting this. So if you think about it, they're the perfect neutral party to host this
Yeah.
because they don't really have a vested interest in one side winning or losing. They see this as a total industry. So they set a tone for that from the beginning. So all of the speakers, all of the flow was designed to create collaboration. So there
Mhm.
was very little self promotion, maybe none. I can only think of one off the top of my head out of like maybe 40 some odd presenters who
Mhm.
was a true self promoter. Everybody else seemed to be there to promote the housing industry. So I'm going to give a tip of the cap to Housing Wire for that. I'm going to also say, turns out journalists can be fun. Like they created a really great energy in the room, as well as in some of the kind of the offline things that we did.
Mhm.
For instance, Total Expert sponsored a pickleball tournament. Well, pickleball's fun right now. It's, a lot of people want to play.
Yeah.
That turned out to be like this wonderful outlet, even in crazy 90 something degree heat in Arizona. Um, and I think it was indicative of, and there were other things that they did as well outside of these meeting rooms that just created this really great ebb and flow of intense interview and information to light engagement and connection. I- I feel like they're paying me to do this, which they're not. I paid out of my pocket to sign up for next year's event.
Yeah.
It was literally the best real estate and mortgage lending event I've ever attended, and I gladly will go again and gladly will
Mm.
self promote at no fee to get other people to join me because I think HousingWire is really the
Mhm.
straw that stirred that drink.
That's great. And just a plug for it too. It's in Colorado next year, Colorado Springs.
So if we're going to plug, let's just go ahead and say at my favorite non-beach resort in the United States of America, the Broadmoor. I mean, I don't know if I've ever been to a property that I enjoy more than the Broadmoor, and I will give all due credit to my lovely bride, Lori, who was raised in Colorado Springs, and that was just the place they would go for a holiday meal or a special treat. And suddenly I got woven into that. And yeah, you do not have any trouble twisting my arm to get me to go to the Broadmoor.
I'm excited for that. I am going to attend next year if I can at all. So,
Please do.
yes, absolutely. Well, good. Well, any closing thoughts on Housing Wire Gathering? And thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, let me give you my final thought on it is I also realized that the sense of community that
Mhm.
flows out from this event is real. So here's what I would encourage anyone to do who maybe didn't attend but is now intrigued. They've seen, what we're talking about, or they saw Dave Savage's summary of this, or Greg Shear's summary of it, or all kinds of people who've done a great job of highlighting some things. I would highly encourage you engage on LinkedIn. It feels to me
Mhm.
like this group of people does the highest level of engagement on LinkedIn. Doesn't mean to imply that they might not post some great photos on Instagram or that they might not
Mhm.
from time to time use Facebook or another social platform. But LinkedIn seems to be the neutral field in which everybody's going to play.
Mhm.
And I would say immediately go there, follow HousingWire as an organization, find some of the key players there,
Mhm.
like Diego or like Clayton or like James, start Logan, follow these folks as
Mhm.
industry thought leaders, and then start paying attention to who's engaging their thought leadership and engage with those folks. What you'll find pretty quickly is one of the most interesting collaboratives of people. And Greg did a great job of this from the stage. He talked about let's stop talking about things like brokers are better or bankers are better or independent mortgage. We're all fighting for the same causes. We're all
Mhm.
standing on Capitol Hill fighting for the same causes. We're all fighting on Main Street for the same people we want to help and serve. So let's start acting more
Mhm.
um, collaborative. And so he really did a great job of promoting that idea from the stage. And I think that carries forward onto a platform like LinkedIn. So go plug in there, find out who some of those voices are that interest you, and start engaging and connecting with them online so that when you're in the room with them next year at the Broadmoor, it'll feel like you're meeting an old friend.
Mhm.
And I really encourage you to get on that now because the sooner you connect and contribute, the better your experience will be at another Housing Wire gathering.
Oh, that's great. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for breaking that down. Now I'm having an even harder time. I have worse FOMO than I did before. So I don't know if that solved anything, but we'll take it. And thank you for joining us on Building Bigger Lives. We're so happy to have you as a listener. Hope this was beneficial for you. If you were not able to attend, or even if you were and you got some different thoughts, let us know what your takeaways were from the event. Find us on Instagram, YouTube, all the places. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks, Michael.
My pleasure.